Good evening. Today is Tuesday, April 13th, 2021. I'm going to take my mask off so people can hear me. We have several items on the agenda this evening. The first item, I'm going to take these out of order simply because Mr. Skorowski is on the agenda for the final changes to the zoning ordinances, and he has a planning board meeting that he has to be at the same time he is attending this meeting. So we're going to do that for Mr. Skorowski and let him be on his way to planning board. Can we bring Mr. Skorowski onto the screen?
I believe he'll be by phone this evening, but he is here.
Okay. And just before we begin, I'd just like to mention the counselors present are Counselor Kuchar, Counselor Van Hazinga, Counselor Zarella, and myself. And Mr. Skorowski, are you there?
I am here.
Oh, and Bernie, and excuse me, Counselor Schultz is here via Zoom. Pardon me. All right, Mr. Skorowski, you may, the ordinance went to its first reading with the provision that it be sent to Legislative Affairs for a few items that were still outstanding. And my understanding is from speaking with you earlier today, and there was a communication sent to all the counselors with regarding 4 items. Typos in formatting, the use table fixes, table of off-street parking requirements, and signage. And I understand, Mr. Skorowski, that you are going to address those tonight for us.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I'm not sure if it's possible to share my screen. I tried to do it just a moment before, and it appears to be disabled. Now, as Councilor Walsh had noted, as this works its way through the hearing process, we want to make sure that, all typos and formatting issues are really ironed up. And, keep in mind, we've been at this almost, 17 months at this point. It's been a long time. So there's been a lot of moving parts. Old citations within the ordinance itself are now referencing pieces of the ordinance that have new references altogether. So a lot of renumbering, a lot of fixing typos, a lot of just making the new ordinance consistent with the language that you all voted on at your March 16th meeting. That was the bulk of the changes that had come through since that reading. And then there were a few important fixes to the 2 most important tables in the zoning ordinance. 181.313, which is the use table. There are a couple small adjustments made there. One that's a little bit larger. Medical treatment facilities were just accidentally omitted from what was sent to the council originally. That was added. But again, that reflects a vote that council had taken. It just didn't make its way to the final document that you all had seen past the last public hearing, so in advance of the April 2nd council meeting. And then the 181.512, the table of off-street parking regulations, nothing of substance changed there. What we just tried to do, working with Paula Karen, our planning board chair, we wanted to make sure every single use that was listed in our use table lined up with all of the uses listed at 181.512, our off-street parking requirements. It's no substantive change. It's just for user friendliness, we want to make sure that number 1 in one table lines up with number 1 in the other, so on and so forth. So those, first groupings of changes I would say are non-substantive, pretty minor changes that are something you would see in this readings process. And then the last piece, and the one I think it'd be appropriate to walk through today, would be signage. As I know, on the hearing March 16th, some requests were made of Attorney Pusateri, our city solicitor, to review specific provisions of the signage ordinance. So I'd be happy to walk through those. For starters, I think that's probably the most important place to begin, if that's okay with you, Councilor Walsh.
Please do.
Okay, great. And hopefully you all had seen, I provided a little bit of a tutorial as well as to how to best view all the changes that were outlined. If you go to the review tab of Microsoft Word, and you can actually click through each of the comments, and starting here at signs and advertising devices, you go to the first comment that was made. It's just a typo that I noted for sort of reference. But the first change here was Attorney Pusateri had suggested that perhaps we could move section 181.5337 because this whole section is termed signs not requiring permits. And this section is about a sign that requires a permit. After further discussion, it seems to logically, it still fits well within the category, and I'm not sure where else it would go. And I don't think it would change anything to move it one way or another, so we opted to keep that section unless I had heard objection. The big piece is lawn signs, 181.5338. You'll note that this is pared down significantly from what the council has looked at, because at your meeting on March 16th, you had requested any references to the sign and duration of how long a lawn sign remains on someone's yard be removed. And there were also concerns about, we had listed various examples of what lawn signs might look like, whether political lawn signs promoting educational uses, so on and so forth. When Attorney Pusateri looked at all of the uses that we outlined, he had suggested we also remove those because it should be, at the end of the day, content neutral. So again, any references to examples of what lawn signs would look like have been removed. Any references to duration, lawn signs can be in a lawn, or size of those signs were removed. And then the last question that was posed, I believe, by Councilor Di Natale, and then the council voted for Attorney Pusateri to look into, was a question of whether there could be other provisions to allow for city officials to remove signage that was sort of a public hazard or a nuisance. And I just want to kind of read this statement here. It said, although Attorney Pusateri felt as though prohibitions on duration and size would be acceptable per Reed versus Gilbert, it was the judgment of the city solicitor that prohibitions related to public nuisances or hazards might be deemed too subjective in nature and or would provide public officials with unwanted discretion to police delicate matters of free speech. So in other words, from our perspective, if you had a size or duration limit, it's very clear, it's very objective. And again, the council didn't want to have either of those things, so we opted to remove them. But anything else sort of referring to public hazards, public nuisances, that gets very subjective. And as city officials policing a matter of free speech in somebody's front lawn, we felt uneasy making a determination one way or another as to if it would constitute a hazard. And then, further, he noted that Massachusetts law, both Mass General law, but also case law supporting it, already supports the removal of hazardous conditions on private property. But ultimately, that would be a determination made by the court and not subjectively by public officials of the city. So this is a very long-winded way of me saying what we have as a remainder here is a very pared down lawn sign section that just says the signs must be in good repair and they shall not be lighted and they shall not be permanently affixed to the property.
Okay.
Any questions there before?
Yes, we have one question from Councilor Zarella.
A couple small things. One is just I would support moving 5337 to another section because even though the general rule is that headings are not a substantive part of the law, it still would be, I think, very confusing to the average citizen to see something listed under signs not requiring a permit and then be told that they have to acquire a permit. I could easily see some arguments coming up where they say, well, I didn't get a permit because it says this was one of the types of signs not requiring a permit. The other thing is simply that in lawn signs 5338, in the final sentence, we're missing the word sign. Said lawn sign, missing the word sign there.
Thank you.
No problem.
So I can, if you have any suggestions on where to move it to, 181-5337?
Can I get back to you on that?
Absolutely. And if you just defer to me to search for it, I suppose I could just find a good place for it in advance of the final reading, if the rest of the committee supported that.
Does that,
Fine by me, certainly. We certainly don't need to pick a spot for it tonight.
City Solicitors, Pusatiri?
Change the title of the header, specific signs or something along those lines, and then that would be less confusing to the constituent.
Councilor Zarella?
As to that, I see the logic, but I think it would also then require adding language to each of the other paragraphs, because currently they're simply listings of types of signs with the presumption that they all fall into the category of not requiring a permit. So we would then need to add language to each of the other paragraphs to say does not require a permit, does not require a permit.
I think it's in there already. I think that repetitive language is in each one of those sections. My memory serves me.
You could be right on that. I do see
And
it
I
in
could be wrong,
5336.
Counselor, so I hate to be in a disagreement with you there.
Which makes more sense to you from a zoning perspective?
From a zoning perspective, I think it's neater if we can find another spot for it, for the one that doesn't require a permit. But if there is no easy spot to move it to, then I would agree that simply making sure that we have language in the other paragraphs specifying no permit required,
Right.
And then changing the heading would be equally acceptable.
So if Mr. Skorowski can find another section where it would be, make sense to include it, that's fine. If not, modify the language in the others to make sure that it says permit not required.
Yes, for the remainder of them.
Okay.
I would suggest that you put it in a separate section somewhere.
Understood.
Yes, and I apologize, Councilor Schultz, I can't see you because the screen is shared, so I do apologize for not seeing that you had a comment, so feel free to just speak up during this section if you do have a comment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Skorowski, does that make sense to you?
It does.
Okay,
I'd be happy to find a place for it.
all right. Any other comments or questions? Yeah, Councilor Van Hazen.
If once signs wraps up, I just have a comment about something else.
Okay. What?
From Nate.
Oh. Okay. All right. Mr. Skorowski, you may continue if you would like to do so.
Great, thank you. I just want to get through those concerns of Attorney Pusateri. Another one here. So this was suggested to be moved out of signs for residential uses, one bulletin or announcement board or identification sign for a lawfully maintained non-conforming residential building or use not exceeding 32 square feet in area is permitted within the required front yard setback, but no closer to the front lot line, etc. And Attorney Pusateri said, please confirm we want this in non-residential uses, was moved from signs for residential uses as it didn't seem appropriate there. So the council deemed it inappropriate there. Is it appropriate here is the question.
Okay, and I believe that Councilor Zarella has a question.
Yeah, I think this originally was intended for residential uses. It was intended for a non-conforming, non-residential use or building in a residential district. So if we're not going to have it there, I'm not sure that we need it anywhere else. I think I don't really see, I haven't thought through it thoroughly, but I don't really see a particular use for it in a non-residential area because we don't have any other provision that would treat non-conforming non-residential things in a non-residential district any different from conforming
Right.
non-residential things in a non-residential district.
Yeah.
And how many times can I say the word residential?
And non-residential.
Right.
And so your solution would be,
If we're not going to have it in the residential section, I don't recall the debate on this a few times ago, but if we had decided to nix it from the residential section, then I think we would just nix it altogether and otherwise move it back to the residential section.
delete it altogether?
I would agree. It's not doing a whole lot here right now.
Okay. So do we want to delete it altogether or put it back where it was before?
I seem to remember that I had supported keeping it where it was, but that other members had
Okay.
voted against that. But I do not have the minutes of that
Okay.
meeting in front of me.
Councilor Van Hazinga, did you have a recollection of that?
A comment on the earlier item in the use table, the medical treatment centers. I was just wondering if there's a definition of that use that got misplaced as well. Just, I didn't see one in the ordinance.
Right. Can you hold that comment until
Sure,
the very
I'd be
end? And
happy
then,
to.
I thought maybe you had a comment on this.
No, it was brought up earlier and things moved
Okay.
along before
All
I
right.
could.
We'll take the, if I forget, remind me at the end before we
No problem at all.
close down. City Solicitor Pusateri, did you have any preference on 181, 53, 52?
I think that if it's relating, can I just stand up? I don't
Yeah,
have my
yeah,
glasses, so-
please, it's a little difficult to read the tiny print from here.
I'm sorry, you'd like me to zoom it in?
No, that's fine. Thank you for.
That's
making it
good.
small. That's good, yeah. Thanks, Tom. The only thought, that I think when I looked at this, I had just needed to refresh my recollection there. I think that the title of the section again says signs for non-residential uses. It could be signs for non-residential uses. Are we saying, Council, Mr. President, that you're talking about signs for non-residential uses in residential districts? Is that what this section really is about?
That's what this clause is about, at least. I would have to actually check again. I have not looked at this since a couple days ago, so I'd have to refamiliarize myself with the section itself. But
I think once we adjusted from regulating by residential districts to residential uses and by non-residential districts to non-residential uses, I don't think there's a need for this altogether.
Unless we start the sentence with in residential districts or in districts where residences are approved, are allowed as a matter of right. And then put the rest of the sentence.
Right.
Could you repeat that language for me, please?
Madam Chair, the sentence could begin in districts which allow residential use by right, comma, lowercase on the O. And then our planning director suggested perhaps just simply a deletion, and I think I would be okay with either of those.
Okay. Did you get that language? I didn't get it all.
I can repeat that if you want.
Can you just repeat it again for me? I don't write as fast as you talk.
I'm sorry. It's in districts that allow residential uses,
Yep.
residential by right,
Residential uses by right?
by right.
Yep.
So I think that's correct, Councilor Israel. Just help me think this through. I think that would allow us to really focus in on in a residential district if you have a non-residential use in that district, this is the sign ordinance.
I think that would work, yes.
Okay, and that's 181.
Folks, I'm going to defer to you there because I'm having trouble with audio, hearing the deliberation.
Did you get that section, Tom, that language?
I did not, but I can always check with one of you or Attorney Pusateri tomorrow morning.
Okay.
If that's the direction that you'd like to head.
All right, that sounds fine. Thank you. Okay, and you may continue.
Okay. Lastly, there was a section that referenced marijuana signage, and Attorney Pusateri had suggested removing this because we are supposed to be applying consistent signage regulation that's, content neutral relative to cannabis versus liquor stores, for example. And all that component of the ordinance was doing anyway was saying you must comply with the CCC sign regulations, which still applies. So in that sense, it's not really doing anything, but sending people to the CCC, and every cannabis applicant we've worked with already is quite familiar with those regulations and, wouldn't be able to open unless they abided by the CCC and got their licenses in the first place.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, and those are all of the changes that you have this evening, is that correct?
Well, that's correct. The other ones I had outlined in this document, I would classify all of them as non-substantive, perhaps with the exception of what Councilor Van Hazinga had noted, treatment facilities. I think, frankly, when both of those must have fallen off the map, but it was a vote taken by the council. I think if you would allow me just to add that definition in advance of the final reading, and that would be submitted before the Thursday deadline.
Okay, City Solicitor Pusateri?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think Director Skorowski already championed this particular issue and these definitions through City Council. And in fact, I think we brought them through readings, and then we put the brakes on them. So this wouldn't be anything new for the City Council, has not already passed on.
Okay, all right. And so that's all that you have for us this evening. Before you go, Mr. Skorowski, I'm going to, Councilor Van Hazinga, did that answer your question? Okay. So we are, I believe we are done with the zoning. And I think we need to, at this point, does anybody have any questions?
I'll make a motion to approve the amended ordinance as currently listed, including the changes that have been made tonight in committee.
Okay.
Second it.
Okay, I have a motion and second. And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, that is unanimous.
Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you, Mr. Skorowski. Have fun at the planning board.
I will, thank you.
Okay. The next item on the agenda, we're going to take things a little out of order this evening. I believe that petition 4421, I've spoken with City Solicitor Pusateri before, that has been withdrawn. I'm going to hold 4621 and 7021 for the end. I spoke with Councilor Boschman before this meeting, and Councilor Boschman would be satisfied having 12820 be given leave to withdraw, as that was addressed in the zoning, the changes to the zoning ordinances. And do I have such a motion?
I'll make a motion to give 12820 and 04421 leave to withdraw.
Okay.
Second it.
Thank you, Councilor Schultz. 44. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
5-0. Thank you very much. And the next item on the agenda is City Solicitor Pusateri. It is Petition 2021, Vincent P. Pusateri II, Esquire, to convert false alarm notification fees to a municipal charge lien as outlined in the enclosed petition. You have the floor, sir.
So some time ago, Chief Martineau contacted the office, and he wanted the department to conduct some collections. And there was a number of would be a small claims types of cases that we would have had to bring to collect on those outstanding bills. So I kind of put it to the side and said that I need to think about this for a little while. So I took a look into it eventually, and Mass General Law does allow us to have municipal charge liens, which would be a procedure set out in the statute that allows a fee to be eventually come to become a municipal lien, and then eventually wind up on the tax bill for the constituency.
Okay.
So we talked about perhaps making some changes to the ordinance. Let me just take a step back, I'm sorry. In order to be able to do that, we do need to have a vote from your council here regarding each type of charge or fee. So specifically, this is going to be about false alarm charges.
Okay.
The code also, the petition also contemplates maybe a small ordinance amendment, which I would then prepare if we approve this petition.
Okay.
That would allow us to really clarify that these alarm applications be signed off by property owners so that they're aware of the potentiality of non-payment of a fee could become at their responsibility.
Okay. It's my understanding that this kind of streamlines the process so that you're not going to court on small fees. It makes that
Yes.
process much easier. Okay.
Exactly. So I would ask for your committee to support this. I think it will also really, we just simply can't, obviously if the chief were here, and I think he came one night in to speak to you, and I wasn't here, so I'm sure he discussed the drain of resources responding to false alarms. And I
Yes.
think it's going to be a great opportunity for us to allow the constituents to understand that there should be responsible for some false alarms.
I am here, Attorney Pusateri.
Thank you, sir. Oh, the chief is here. Chief, you may have the floor if you would like to address the legislative affairs.
Sure, I'd just like to reiterate what Attorney Pusateri said. On any given year, our officers are responding to somewhere in excess of 1,000 false alarms a year. And for the most part, most of them take care of the situation and we no longer respond. But inadvertently each year, we're chasing dozens of unpaid fines. So keep in mind, we're not issuing fines until after the third response of a false alarm. So, the first and second one, we're just providing written notice that they had a false alarm and that they could face fines upon the third. Every alarm that comes into the police station, we're dispatching two police officers tied up for 10 minutes. So there's substantial resources that go into these false alarms. And it seems like we're always chasing, anywhere in excess between $3,000 and $5,000 a year in unpaid fines. And going to court individually just didn't make sense. That's where the conversation started with myself and the solicitor. So hopefully we can move forward with this. I think it would be a productive way to handle this moving forward. And I'll be happy to answer any questions on how we respond or what type of actions we take.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. Councilor Zarilla?
This question is for Solicitor Pusateri. I just want to know, I think this is a great idea. I would like to know if there is any limitation in the statute that you identified that would prevent us from applying this equally to building, zoning, and health violations.
The only limitation is that there be an individual vote. And your thinking is, I think, spot on here, where do we need to make a better fee assessment? And then maybe take individual votes on those individual fees. And that's one of those projects that you and I keep discussing. We're going to comb through and we're going to find all those areas. So let's put that one on the list, Mr. President, President Zarella.
Absolutely.
Thank you
I think that's a really good idea, too. All right.
for that.
Do I have any other questions? Do I have a motion? I didn't hear who made the motion, but
Councilor Van Hazen.
thank you. And a chorus of seconds.
Good to see you, Chief.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No opposed. 5-0. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, City Solicitor Pusateri.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, everybody.
Good night. All right. The next item on the agenda, I think I'm going to take 7021, which is Councilor Green's petition. And the reason I'm going to take that next, and I think, is Councilor Green on, or is she on? She's not, okay. I spoke with Pete Stevens today, and who was on the school committee. The school committee actually has oversight over everything in Crocker Field. So although I think it's a very good idea to have the booth at Crocker Field named after Dave Clark, we don't have the authority to do that. So what I would recommend, if we are all in favor of if we all think that that is a good idea, we could recommend to the school committee that they make that part of the agenda for an upcoming meeting. Councilor Zarella.
I will make a motion to amend 07020 to a resolution of the council that the booth should be named in honor of Dave Clark,
Okay.
with the consent of the school committee.
All right.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. And any other questions or comments? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
That passes 5-0.
Motion to approve as amended.
Thank you, I almost forgot. Second by Councilor Kuchar. All those in favor of approving as amended?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, and again, the vote is 5-0. Thank you very much. The last item on the agenda is 04621. Councilor Marcus D. Natale to petition that the new Fitchburg City Hall Legislative Building be named the David Clark Legislative Building in honor of former school committee member, city councilor, WEIM, WPKZ radio, and FAT sports broadcaster David Clark for his many decades of public service to the city of Fitchburg. And I understand that Councilor Di Natale is on. Councilor, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Thank you for the committee for allowing me to speak. I made some prepared remarks on this. I speak before you all this evening in support of my petition to name the new city legislative building located at 700 Main Street the David Clark Legislative Building. David Clark embodied the pride and spirit of Fitchburg. A lifelong resident, Dave left his imprint on thousands of residents through his many decades of service to the city he loved. Dave worked at WEIM radio station where he reported on sports, news, and was known as the voice of play-by-play for local high school sports. In 1984, he was named its sports director. Dave hosted a program called Sports Live, where he discussed local and national sporting news and interviewed many celebrities in the sports industry. Dave's humor, insight, and kindness reached into thousands of homes. His voice recognized, respected, and eagerly listened to by thousands. There would not be a high school sporting event without Dave's commentary. Dave worked at Fitchburg State University in the IT department for 29 years, retiring in 2018. He was devoted to his family, raising 3 daughters with his wife, Sherry. Dave's passion for Fitchburg and its people drove him to want to enter local politics. From 2002 to 2005, he served on the Fitchburg School Committee. From 2006 to 2019, he served 14 years in the Fitchburg City Council, first as Ward 1 councilor for 8 years, and then as an at-large councilor for 6. Dave's in-depth knowledge of the city's history gave great perspective to other city councilors when facing important matters before them, including myself. Dave's community service did not end there. serving on the Board of Directors for FATV and on the Board of Directors for the Crocker Field Restoration Committee. He was also awarded the On-Air Personality of the Year Award in 2018 by FATV. Dave was a friend, a mentor, and his kind personality was infectious, always going out of his way to greet you as you entered the City Council chamber, always giving equal weight to his colleagues' opinions. The question before this committee this evening is not why this legislative building should be named after him, but why not? I recognize that a compelling case can be made that others in Fitchburg's history are just as worthy of this honor and consideration. However, I would like to make note of one important distinction that came to my mind when coming up with this idea when it comes to naming this new building after him. Dave was one of only 3 city councilors who served on the city council from the time 718 Main Street was evacuated in 2012 to when the loan was procured to restore 718 Main Street to its former historical glory. And with that restoration, this building that the council sits in this evening, 700 Main Street. Dave was a consistent advocate of returning City Hall back to Main Street. He voted in favor of accepting this building as a gift from Bank of America. He shared the vision that this facility and 718 Main Street would serve as a strategic economic development catalyst for downtown's revitalization. Dave's vote to procure the loan to make this project a reality was a crucial one, or else this project would not have happened. That is Dave's personal imprint on this building for generations to come, and is, in my opinion, why it is only fitting that we honor his memory, his commitment, and his devotion to Fitchburg by naming this new legislative building after him. I thank the members of the committee for allowing me this opportunity to speak this evening. I ask for your favorable recommendation. I'll be happy to take any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. I do have 2 people who wrote in who are, I don't believe, are here. I know Jeff Bean had called me earlier today and said that he would be driving while the meeting was ongoing. He sent in these comments. He would like to amend the petition to have the legislative building named after Ron Ingemy. He served as city council president for 14 years, and I would ask that the petition be amended to name the broadcast booth at Crocker Field in memory of Dave Clark. There was a second comment, and I don't know if Mary Troy is on there or not, but she submitted a comment in writing that said, "Great idea. Mr. Clark deserves recognition for all he did for the city. He did it quietly and with dignity." Those are the comments that were sent in. Are there any comments from or questions from the committee, Legislative Affairs? And we do, I thank you very much, and we do have someone in the audience who would like to speak. Mr. Boschman.
Very 101 St. Andrew. I was going to ask you to give this, to go with the Amy Green petition. I don't feel that I was going to ask you to take 4621 and give it leave to withdraw. There's many people throughout the city that a building could be named after. Prime example would be George J. Burke. He was a Ward 2 councilor for a number of years, then became a mayor for many, many years. He started the Civic Day parades that we still have today, and then he became a state legislator. And then you have Evo Gogan, you have Ron Ingemy, you got Joe Ward, you got Jerry Lombard, and the list goes on and on and on. So I feel that this would not be really fair if we named this building after Dave Clark, even though I liked him and he's a nice guy. But the list is a mile long, and it wouldn't be fair to the other people, in my opinion. And, that's why I'm talking. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Boschman. I did have a couple of people who called me and said that they also thought that other people would be well-deserved having the building named after them. I guess my opinion is that I think it would be a good idea to get information from the community as to their preference for whom this building is named. If the community expresses their willingness to have the building named after Dave Clark, I would certainly have no problem with that whatsoever, to recognize his accomplishments. I'm just wondering if maybe we need to gather other information from other sources before we name a building. Councilor Zarella?
I would also support an approach of that sort if we are to name it after anyone. I'm a little hesitant to name it after anyone at all, simply because we only have one legislative building, and we've had so many, as my colleague mentioned, we have so many people who have dedicated public service to the city of Fitchburg in a legislative capacity. And to put one person's name on the building would be to suggest that that person above all the others is worthy of that honor. And it's not that I liked Dave Clark a lot. I only had the privilege of serving with him for one term, but I considered it a privilege. I think his service to this city cannot be overstated, and I certainly would not argue that he is less deserving than any other person. But I think that there's a problem with picking any one person to say they are the most deserving in Fitchburg's history. I do want to note for the committee and for the council and the public that I do have an offer from an anonymous donor, rather a donor who would wish that his donation remain anonymous, to provide a plaque for the council chamber, which would include the names of all councilors who have served the city over the years, with space to update as councilors retire. I feel that this would perhaps be a preferable way to dedicate this space to the memory of those who have served this city, in that it allows us to honor a plurality of people rather than having to pick a single one.
May I speak, Madam Chairperson?
Yes, Councilor Schultz, you may.
I'm in support of this petition that Councilor Di Natale's put forward, and I think the important point that he made was that Councilor Clark was involved with the securing this building for the council. So yes, there are many, many people in Fitchburg's history that the building could be named after, but they weren't involved with this building, and Councilor Clark was. And he gave just as much to this city as any other person that was named. And I would vote to support this petition of Councilor Di Natale's for that reason. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Schultz. Councilor Kuchar?
Thank you. I am likewise in agreement with Councilor Schultz as well as Councilor Di Natale. Councilor Clark was integral in getting this building and for voting for the City Hall, as well as he was also involved when they evacuated City Hall. He's a perfect candidate for naming, if we are going to name this building. So I would be in favor of Councilor Di Natale's position.
Thank you. It has also been suggested to me that we could, and as an alternative, it's similar to what Councilor Zarella has proposed, that we could create a wall of fame and have individual plaques, and I don't know what the anonymous donor would think of that, but that you could have individual plaques that would honor each person that the council feels is worthy of mentioning on such a wall of fame. So that would be an alternative to this petition. Councilor Van Hazen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to echo your comments that maybe we should take a little more time before we make a decision. That this is, one of our first meetings ever held in this building, and it's not yet open to the public. So maybe we should hold this for a little bit and think about it, and like you said, take some more input from the public as to whether this is the right path to go down. I will say I'm very grateful for Councilor Clark's service to the city in many aspects, and he was, a gentle soul that I think was very admirable how he conducted himself as a councilor in many other aspects, and I think he would be a perfectly fine person to honor. But like you said, there are possibly many other people, and maybe we should. Well, this would be a permanent action, let's take a little more time and think about it and take some more input before we make a decision.
And is that a motion?
So I would take a motion to hold this petition?
Hold it in committee?
Yes.
All right. And I have a motion and second to hold it in committee so that we can take the opportunity to gather additional information from other sources and other recommendations in this regard, and we'll revisit it at such time as we have that information. I have a motion from Councilor Van Hazinga and a second from Councilor Zarella to hold it in committee. All in favor?
Aye.
Councilor Schultz?
No.
No. That is 4-1. All right. So it's going to be held in committee. We'll gather some more information. It doesn't mean that this will not happen. It just means that we'll consider it further. Okay? Thank you. And I think that that is the last item on the agenda.
Motion to adjourn?
Okay. 6:52. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.